Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel, where you'll find some of the most fair and honest game reviews out there. And if you guys couldn't already tell, I grew up as a Genesis fan, okay? I was a Genesis kid when I was young, and I played many of the 16-bit classics from that console back in the day. So today I was like, you know what? I feel like talking about some Genesis stuff. But I'm not gonna do this alone. I'm gonna bring in a friend.
Hey everybody, Jim here from the KidShoryuken channel right here on YouTube, coming to you from Club SEGA here in Akihabara, which is very fitting because I'm joining Jake today to talk to you about one of the best SEGA games ever created, in my personal opinion, Streets of Rage 2. I grew up as a 100% Nintendo kid, but anytime I had the chance to go to someone's house and play SEGA, we were either playing Sonic or Streets of Rage, so I'm really excited to get to join Jake today to talk to you about one of my favorite beat-em-ups ever, and that is Streets of Rage 2.
Welcome, Jim. This is going to be a lot of fun because what better way to tackle a Genesis classic than with another friend of mine here on YouTube who loves retro games just as much as I do. So without further ado, let's dive right into this review and talk about a game that some believe is the best out of this entire series. Streets of Rage 2 was released on the SEGA Genesis in 1992. It's the sequel to the first game of the series and considered to be the best entry by many people. Back in the day, I played this much later after it first came out on the console. I remember renting it at a local video store every once in a while and playing with a friend. The story in Streets of Rage 2 is pretty basic. A big bad guy returns to cause problems and you need to smack them up a few times with your friends. Simple and straightforward. But here's the extra details. About a year after the events of the first Streets of Rage, Axel, Adam, and Blaze are celebrating their victory over Mr. X, the leader of the criminal organization known as the Syndicate. The next morning, Blaze gets a call from Adam's younger brother Skate, saying that his home was ransacked and a picture of his brother in chains was left at the door. The scary part is that Mr. X was shown in it. Without warning, groups of criminals start causing havoc in the streets, signaling the return of Mr. X and his desire for revenge against everyone. Blaze contacts Axel and the two of them team up with Skate and their wrestler friend Max Thunder to rescue Adam and stop Mr. X once and for all. Like I said, the story isn't too complicated and only serves as a thread for what is otherwise a very gameplay-focused experience.
Like I said before, my early experiences with the SEGA Genesis and SEGA games in general was almost exclusively with Sonic and Streets of Rage, or as it's known in Japan, Bare Knuckle. And while the SEGA Genesis was selling like hotcakes in North America at the time this game was released in January of 1993, and SEGA games were flying off the shelves, the Mega Drive in Japan sat squarely in third place behind the Super Famicom and the PC Engine, so Bare Knuckle wasn't quite the household name that Streets of Rage was in the US, which I'm happy that SEGA found so much success there, because even though there was always a Nintendo console in my house, I never complained when I visited a friend who had SEGA, especially if they had Streets of Rage 2, because it was perfect for some co-op fun. SEGA would eventually find greater success in Japan with the Sega Saturn a couple years later, but the Bare Knuckle games would never be as popular here as their US counterparts.
So this game has been re-released so many different times across many different platforms. I mean, you can play Streets of Rage 2 right now on mobile devices. That's how wild this has gotten. But this is actually kind of cool because I feel like so many people love this game and they talk about it so much, you want to be able to have easy access to it. So anything that we say today about this game is going to be applied to every single version of it out there. One thing I do love about Streets of Rage 2 is the music. It has this vibe and this just sound to it that perfectly encompasses the time of which it came out. This was the end of the 80s 80s right into the early 90s, so you still have that vibe and that spirit of that time frame really injected into the music, and it really shows. It's just something that has stuck with me for a long time, and many other people love the soundtrack of this game. For some people, this is arguably one of the best soundtracks on the SEGA Genesis, period, out of all the games that were released for its library of titles, and I could totally understand why. It just sounds good, you could get really into the vibe of it, like start to dance and stuff, like it just sounds fantastic. But that's just me. Tell me a little bit about some of your first impressions of Streets of Rage 2, Jim.
So, Bare Knuckle 2, in my personal opinion, is one of the better video game sequels of all time, just like Resident Evil 2, Street Fighter 2, Sonic 2. It took what was already really great about the original, namely the really fun co-op beat-em-up gameplay and the amazing graphics and sound, and it just elevated everything up 2 or 3 notches. Better graphics, better music, better gameplay, more playable characters. It's everything you want from a gaming sequel.
But of course, none of this really means anything unless a game actually plays very good. I mean, that would honestly suck if that wasn't the case. So does Streets of Rage 2 play as good as everybody says it has over the years? Does it still hold up? Gameplay-wise, there's nothing too complicated about Streets of Rage 2. It's like any other beat 'em up from the 16-bit era, so if you played anything similar, then you'll kinda get the idea. There's legions of bad guys that need a good smacking, and you're here to deliver it. There's 4 different playable characters to choose from, but they all play about the same. You have all of the essential tools that you need for a standard beat 'em up, along with some very solid and responsive controls. You could play through the main game alone or with a friend via co-op, but it's the same game regardless how you play it. I'll admit though, playing this alone is a lot tougher since you have to pay attention to more things happening around you. When the screen fills up with enemies, things can get chaotic. Co-op is a lot more fun and can lighten the difficulty just a bit, but the downside is that friendly fire is always on. You have to be careful with your teammate as you move around. To me, the game suffers because of this, because you and your teammate will end up hurting each other more than the bad guys do in some situations, which could be devastating when you're about to get to a boss fight. But outside of that, Streets of Rage 2 is a very solid playthrough from start to finish.
This is an all-around much better game than its predecessor in my opinion. Streets of Rage started out as being something of a Final Fight knockoff, albeit with all of the trappings of a well-made SEGA game, but Streets of Rage 2 reaches a level of quality that the Final Fight series would never surpass. The gameplay here is much smoother than it was in the previous game, and you have 4 playable characters that offer up a bit more in the way of variety. Axel and Blaze make a return, and their movesets have been expanded, but you also get a powerhouse character in the form of Max. He's kind of like this game's Mike Hagar, and that's something that was missing from the previous game, and you also get Skate, who is a much faster and more agile character, so the door is open for a wider variety of pairings when playing co-op, and each character has at least one special attack in addition to their life-draining super attacks. So there are a lot of tweaks that were made to the gameplay here to kick it up a notch. Plus, there's a greater variety of enemies, more stage hazards to look out for, and even though both games feature 8 stages, this game feels like it's just a little bit longer than the first. In short, it's a bigger game with better gameplay, which is exactly what you want from a good sequel to an already great game.
Personally for me, I never really found it all that difficult to play through Streets of Rage 2, even when I was playing solo and just going through the game like that. The game itself is really short and you could actually take less time if you had a co-op partner with you, but even when I was just going at it alone, I still felt that the difficulty was a nice gradual progression, and I felt like I at least had enough tools at my disposal to get through some of the game's tougher sections. One thing I should mention that might be a little bit frustrating for some people is that you only have a set number of continues to finish the game. You're not able to gain extra continues as you're going through each stage. You only gain extra lives. For most people, including myself, that's pretty standard for most retro games, especially during the 16-bit and the 32-bit era, but I can understand if some people get a little bit annoyed with that, especially if they just want to finish the game and see the ending and stuff. But if you like a decent challenge, I feel like this is totally fine. You could still mess around with some of the options to give you even more continues or more lives, but again, I didn't really feel like it was a bad thing that really impedes on the experience.
True, it's definitely not a perfect game. While it is a fairly easy playthrough for the most part, yeah, it does still feature those classic irritating enemies and quick deaths that plague a lot of games from this time period, but I'm always willing to overlook that. It's simple, repetitive, mostly mindless fun that I find myself coming back to on a fairly regular basis. It's not quite as enjoyable as a single-player experience, though, no beat-em-up is really, but I'd say the positives here far outweigh the negatives.
So can the two of us recommend that you check out Streets of Rage 2 on any platform? For everything that I nitpick about this, I still think that the game is super classic. Even after all these years, it feels very good to play through. Between the solid controls, the sprite work in the backgrounds, and the amazing soundtrack, I always have a fun time coming back to this. Playing through this game again for review was pretty enjoyable and a nice retread to one of my favorite game systems of all time, the SEGA Genesis. But what about you, kid? What's your verdict on this?
Well, I feel like a bit of a broken record here, but I love this game. I think it's one of the finest 16-bit beat-em-ups ever made, probably only being surpassed by Turtles in Time in my opinion. The gameplay is solid and very fun, the graphics are improved over the original, with some nicely detailed and colorful stages to play in and some very cool character designs. And to make a great game even better, Streets of Rage 2 features yet another unforgettable soundtrack by Yuzo Koshiro that showed that the Genesis sound chip was capable of way more than a lot of people gave it credit for. So if somehow you've still never played Streets of Rage 2, rectify that today because you are missing out on one of the absolute best games of its kind.
And there you have it, everyone. Those are our thoughts about Streets of Rage 2 for the SEGA Genesis and pretty much every other platform this game has been ported to. This was a lot of fun to revisit a game from my childhood, to revisit that console which I love, the SEGA Genesis. And what's more, I couldn't do it without my friend KidShoryuken. Jim, thank you so much for joining me in this review. Tell everybody where they can find you and some of your amazing content.
Hey Jake, thanks very much for having me on your channel today and letting me talk with you about this absolute classic of a SEGA game. For anyone who's interested, you can go check me out on KidShoryuken right here on YouTube. Lots of reviews for lots of games on numerous different consoles. Lots of Japan exclusive stuff too that you may never have heard of. You might find that interesting. Plus lots of game hunting here in Japan, arcade videos, and just all around that great Japanese gaming flavor. So if you're interested, go check me out. KidShoryuken here on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc., etc. And again, thanks so much, Jake, for having me on your channel today. And I do hope to come back again real soon.
Thanks again, Jim. I really appreciate you. It's awesome to have you a part of this. If you haven't already, definitely check out KidShoryuken's YouTube channel. He has a lot of great content that's straight from Japan, which is freaking awesome. There'll be links in the description box down below. But of course, like any other game that we review on this channel, that's just our opinion about Streets of Rage 2. Let me know your own thoughts about this game down below in the comments section. Tell me, are you a fan of Streets of Rage? Do you like any of the other games in the series? Did you play Streets of Rage 4 yet? What are some other retro games that you just love going back to that give you a really big sense of nostalgia? Talk to me about that stuff down below in the comments section. Thanks a bunch for watching the video. I really appreciate it a ton. I'll have more videos for you to enjoy here on the side that I know you'll love. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon too. Don't forget to visit my Patreon linked below for early access to new videos every week, and join the Discord server too. It's linked in the description box below. You'll definitely love being a part of it. Thanks again, peace out, and stay epic, everybody.